Welcome to the Block and Tackle Show, hosted by Karl Block. Karl is a partner in the law firm of Loeb & Loeb here in Los Angeles, California. He will be tackling some of the biggest issues in business today. Listen, learn, and enjoy as he leaves no stone unturned during deep conversations with some of today's most amazing business leaders. Welcome to the show.
So you just mentioned somebody who, really was having a real hard time struggling going from the founder to the CEO. Tell me some other stories of people that you've talked to that just, what kinds of things did them in, so to speak, so that they weren't able to make the transition.
Yeah. The other, that was a success story ultimately, right?
Okay.
But I've also had experience with CEO founders. There was one CEO who had a company and hired people quickly after she got her Series A round, and I was coaching her. I use the analogy: you ultimately have to get off the dance floor and into the balcony, right? You have to be able to kind of see the choreography from the top and not be in the dance steps. And I worked with her for probably 3 weeks, and she, kind of rightfully, in a way, her micromanaging was maybe the right thing for the time, because she also hired a lot of low-level people, right? So there wasn't really a high level of quality in the senior team that she could delegate to. So I was working with her and trying to help her get on a path to build a senior team that she could then move away from this path that was really burning her out. I mean, she was one of the people that I interviewed in the 360 was her husband, who said she never stops. and that's because she had to be in every single aspect of the business. Ultimately, she decided that she didn't want to stop, that was the way that she felt most comfortable leading the team. I don't know how well that company is doing now. It could be it does fine. There are, many CEOs that have stayed in that kind of founder's mode, if you will, and have done well. But it's often a barrier to scaling an organization.
I would imagine that, and certainly people in the B round, they pick that up.
Yeah.
They definitely pick that up. I mean, does it, personally, if you can't get them where you think you should be, is it discouraging? Is it just more like life lessons and data points for people?
Yeah. For me, at some early on, it hurt, and I took it personally, like I couldn't help this person get to where they needed to go. And then ultimately I realized, okay, well, if you're not willing to lean into this process, if I'm not able to help you go where you want to go, life is too short. I tend to cap the number of clients that I have at like 12 or 15. I want that experience for them to be really great and for me to be really great. And when those two things aren't working, I'm now willing to walk away without any compunction, really.
Understood. And that makes sense. Okay. Yeah. So on the happier note, tell us about some of the stories where you're really happy that they had the hero's journey and they graduated to where they needed to be, and with your guidance.
Yeah. So so this is another CEO founder that started and successfully launched a data science company. I got the same type of feedback in the 360 analysis, and that, although the CEO was brilliant, people followed the vision and the passion. There wasn't really any emotional intelligence going on there, right? So there was a lot of fear in the organization, and we worked on that a couple of times. There were a couple of feedback sessions. There was progress made, and ultimately, so much so that it ignited some compassion in this leader, where he started having fireside chats that helped he and his team get through the pandemic, helped them get through times when where revenues just weren't coming in, and really created an open dialogue between the leadership and the organization, and from that, engagement scores went up. They're really on the verge of doing something really exciting now, and I'm pretty sure that this organization is going to be very successful.
Oh, that's fantastic. And especially, I mean, it isn't easy to develop an EQ and be so cognizant of things. So kudos to you that you were able to help this CEO do that. Sometimes you think they are who they are, and they're not very malleable, but apparently, you have the magic touch.
And certainly others do as well. And I hate when I hear the expression that leopard can't change its spots. Especially the science supports that, particularly around emotional intelligence, that it can be learned, and there is, there are behavioral changes that are possible if you put the work in. Certain things we're genetically predisposed towards, and I'm never going to be a center for the Sixers, but there are attributes that we all have that we can change if we put the work in.
No, that makes sense. I appreciate you saying that you follow the science on that. Not everybody does, and I think there is a tendency sometime in management not to actually think, hey, I can actually help this person be better in these things. He or she, they just are who they are. We just build around them or whatever. So, but look, I think that's really impressive.
Yeah.
So, okay. We're going to talk about something that, I won't keep you here for 3 hours, but I think I could talk to you about this for 3 days, because you've seen it tons of times. I've seen it tons of times. And it is along these lines of how you graduate from the founder to the manager. There's obviously a lot of controversy about this. You sent me an article the other day from a CEO said, well, did I say that? Well, I didn't really say that. And
so that instance, which caused a stir, quite frankly, in my client base, is Brian Chesky, who's the CEO founder of Airbnb. He was at a conference, and he was talking about what people later termed founders mode, right? Which was everything that I talked about, where and is needed to launch these companies, right? You need somebody who's a visionary, who has a big picture, who has a high risk for tolerance, who is an innovator, who's a disruptor, right? Somebody who is forceful and diligent and getting shit done, right? And so he was talking about how he, because venture capital executives and investors are always trying to move these founders into the, manager role, right? Into this again, getting off the dance floor and into the balcony and leading the team from that perspective. And what Brian left the audience with the sense of is staying in the founder's mode was fine. And that's what Steve Jobs did. And that's what Jeff Bezos did. And that's what and Elon Musk, that's what they did. So stay with that mode. Right. So, and a couple of the FANG companies, I worked with Jeff Bezos firsthand early on. And yes, he was in the warehouse picking orders in the early days. But a company gets to a certain size that you can't scale if you're going to micromanage everything, right? And so I really think that is flawed thinking, and it sounds like Brian is, either corrected the perception of what he was trying to say, or just is backtracking a little bit. I think it's probably the former, because people walked away with this sense of, okay, I just have to be this hard driving, micromanaging leader, and that's going to suit me well. But staying with the Jeff Bezos example, he was that way to a point, right? And probably flexed into that style when he felt like he had to innovate a certain aspect of the business. But you cannot run a global organization and be involved in every single detail, especially what Amazon has created, which is, they're experts and a go-to source for everything you can think of physically, right? It's just impossible to be at that level of detail for all aspects of the business.
Yeah, and without referencing him in particular, what I would say is, your experience undoubtedly is. There's a reason why, the B round guys need to see that, and the C round and the private equity, or if you're doing an offering, they know that. And for every Elon Musk, who may be that micromanager, there's tons of companies that couldn't do that successfully. And of course, people that I know that have worked for Jeff Bezos say, he got to the point where he hires the best of the best of the best, and he empowers them to go do it.
Exactly.
And obviously, if you don't, that's not really going to be good. But how do you, if you're trying to get a company to go public and you want investors to actually have confidence in the management team, so that if you have a heart attack, the company it doesn't die. I mean, there's just so many ways that this matters, and why, for whatever was talked about in that article. Yeah, I think that, just because, Ohtani, could hit a grand slam in the ninth inning one game, doesn't mean that every time he's up in the ninth inning, he's going to hit a home run. I mean, right. It's something that's different.
Yeah, your point is it takes the rest of the team.
Yeah, 100%. And how do you attract? This. How do you attract the best and the brightest to work under you if you're not developing them and they don't have autonomy in anything?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the point I was about to make. Is you can't attract high level talent if they can't breathe or think or contribute. Right.
And so when you're talking about founder versus manager, and you talk about how to transition people, is this literally the hardest part of what you do?
Yes, it really is, because the founders are they're there for a reason. They launched the company, based on that set of skills that they had, right? They're all evangelists, and they can sell their vision to in the fundraising process. They sell their vision in the hiring process, and people buy into that, right? And they're very successful in that early stage. If they keep going that in that same way, they're going to burn out. People are going to get pissed off and leave, and the company will fail, right? So to make that leap requires a whole different style of leadership, and some can make it and have maybe have had previous experience in that, and others it's really a hard journey. But again, one with just thoughtful consideration for the habits that they're building is really achievable.
Do you have you ever had to have like a really blunt discussion with somebody who's really struggling with the transition to say, look, you've got to do this or else, your company's probably going to be sold in a suboptimal situation.
Yeah.
Because somebody's going to say, you've got this product, you've got this technology, but you're not developing a strong enough team.
Yeah.
And your Series A or your Series B people are going to say, look, you're not going to take this very high, and somebody else is going to buy it and put in a good management team. Have you ever had to just be that blunt with somebody?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I gave you an example earlier where I had to, speak to the CEO in those terms where it said, look, you got to choose your path now. But there have definitely been others where, I've had to say, look, this thing is about to crack. I can see the tension within the organization. People are upset. They're not happy working here. They're not likely to stay in the long term, and you're not going to be able to build this thing into what you want. So so sometimes there are some hard, difficult conversations, some radical candor, if you will, that has to happen in this process.
I mean, look, sometimes you got to be that blunt to make it work, I guess.
Yeah.
The good news is you get to know the people well enough. It's not in the first conversation that you have to have that.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So you know well enough that you've got enough trust with them, and you know them well enough to get the message across.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to balancing both, are there times where sometimes they slip back into founders mode and that's okay? Or do they wear two hats sometimes? I mean, how does that shake out for you?
Yeah, again, I think that being able to flex in those two modes is important, right? So, when the company is scaling and everything's going well, and you got a great product, that's the time to be in manager mode, right? But sometimes you need some new innovation, right? And that's exactly the time when a founder needs to go back to what they were good at initially, right? Is really kind of driving a process, building a vision. A lot of times they're technically savvy, and that's the time for them to really kind of roll up their sleeves and lean into that process. But it's really important to be able to flex and be able to have that skill set in the manager mode as well as in the founder mode.
That makes sense. And I mean that it happens all the time. Very few companies really make it with only one product.
Yeah, exactly.
It's pretty difficult.
Exactly.
And then, the rest of the management team, they're just focused on numbers and performance and such. So I get it.
Mm.
So, okay. So what people will watch this, people will listen to this.
Yeah.
What shall we leave them with? What key takeaways would you like to talk about so that everybody knows, hey, we talked about a lot of this stuff. Some of
Yeah.
it's high level, some of it's super pragmatic.
Yeah.
What do we want to leave people with here?
Yeah. I think one that the coaching profession is growing pretty rapidly, and what I'm happy about is it's there's no longer um, this process where people can just wake up one day and say, I'm going to be a coach. And they still do that. But if you're smart about it, you look for people who are credentialed in doing it. And, in Silicon Valley, it is everyone there has a coach, right? Steve Jobs had a coach, right? Bill Gates had a coach. All these big companies had coaching along the way. So, and that's helped to kind of build a foundation, which is growing everywhere. It's such a valuable tool for people to have, to be able to have an area of confidentiality that you can think out loud, try different things, try different approaches, and get real and honest feedback, right? Because you're not going to get it from your employees. You don't want to show that vulnerability to your boss or your coworkers. So it is kind of a really safe place to, again, develop a level of self-awareness and, most importantly, an action plan. So particularly if you're about to go on this journey of being a CEO founder, which has the most, in my opinion, the most dramatic growth, then having a coach is really essential.
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I would guess that you would say, it's not a cookie cutter thing coaching people. It's, different industries, different styles,
Yeah.
different constituencies within a company.
Right.
That, just because, you could just as easily do somebody with a construction business as you could in entertainment, but it's really getting to know, developing the character and the confidence of the person.
Yeah, exactly. And the business, what the business is almost secondary, right? Because if you're building a company, you're building a senior team, you're building a team within beneath that. You're trying to build strategic alignment around that team. You're trying to build a culture that has values that speak to the people, that aligns around a central purpose that enables the team members to get up every day and feel charged up about coming to work. So those things end up fitting in just about every company, no matter what the product or service that they're trying to develop.
Yeah, and again, to sort of hammer this home, you can be a great executive and run a company very successfully. You don't have to copy Jeff Bezos. You don't have to copy Steve Jobs. You can have your own style.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
And guys like you can say, I think this is what's going to work for you, or you can coach them in what you think is going to be best for them.
Yeah, that's part of the process.
Okay. Well, listen, I really appreciate you coming on. I think my viewers, my listeners are really going to enjoy this. Again, as I said earlier, it's not often that I hear people talk about Joseph Campbell or the hero's journey. And sometimes people are reticent to be as explicit as you are about the founder versus manager dynamic, even though it's incredibly common in growing a business. So I really appreciate you.
Yeah.
For anybody who's watching or listening, if you have questions, email me at the show, Karl at blockandtackleshow.com. That's my email address. And if they're questions for me, I'll answer them. If they're questions for Dave, I'll forward them on, and we'll make sure that you're heard. And so thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and take care. Thanks for tuning in. If you want more info on the show, please visit blockandtackleshow.com. And you can also email me at Karl at blockandtackleshow.com. Thanks for tuning in.